Hey guys, welcome to the video. In this video, we're just taking a look at a recent regiment I painted up for the American Civil War. This is a Union regiment, and this is the 54th Massachusetts. So just the same format as my last video, just talk a bit about the miniatures and then I'll move on to a smidge history of the 54th. So these are plastic Union miniatures from Perry's, and I actually bought the coloured troops heads from Perry's as well. So I cut the heads off the plastic bodies and then I stuck these metal sculpts on, and they are noticeably different with the facial expressions and stuff, and I think it looks really good. So yeah, that's that. The flags are from Flags of War, and these little kind of movement trays are from Charlie Foxtrot. So just moving on to a bit about the 54th Massachusetts. So they were serving from March 13th, 1863 to August 4th, 1865. So kind of like mid-war onwards when they started serving. When they were first recruiting, by May 1863, the regiment reached a number of 1,000 enlisted men. So I assume that was 10 companies. So it was 1,000 enlisted men with 100 white officers. These were led by white officers, this regiment. So yeah, I assume there was 10 companies in there. Also, the 54th Massachusetts, which I didn't quite realise, but they were actually the first military unit consisting of black soldiers to be raised in the North during the Civil War. So they weren't the first black regiment or companies, but they were the first that were raised in the North. So I think that's where it kind of trips you up, because you've got a few other regiments that were really successful, and that's why the 54th were kind of raised. So the actual governor of Massachusetts appointed Robert Gouldshaw, who's the son of an abolitionist, to command the regiment as a colonel, and he started off as a captain, and they bumped him right up to colonel just to lead the regiment. Before I go any further, there's a really good film called Glory, which kind of follows Robert Shaw and the 54th. So I really highly recommend. I imagine most of you have probably seen it already, as it's a very, very good film. So yeah, notable battles. Like I said, these are more kind of later end of the war, but they fought famously at Fort Wagner and Olustee as well. Olustee, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the Battle of Boykin Mill. So yeah, kind of a few. That's not all their battles. They had a few more, but just a few notable ones. Kind of there's an interesting thing with 54th that they were actually kind of a pay scandal. It's kind of covered in the film, but if anyone didn't know, they were actually recruited on the promise that they would be paid equal to a white soldier, which at the time was about $13 a month. But when they were stationed to South Carolina, the Department of the South decided to actually pay them $10 a month, and out of that $10, $3 a month would be paid for would be taken for their uniforms, whereas a white soldier didn't have to pay for their uniforms. So there was a big scandal about it, and Shaw himself protested for equal pay, and even after Shaw's death, Colonel Edward Needles Hallowell took control of the regiment, and he again petitioned for equal pay, and eventually Congress eventually enacted a bill to allow full pay to those soldiers that had been freemen before the start of the war, which and I say a lot of coloured troops, but some of the coloured troops weren't freemen. They actually became free during the war. So if anything, this kind of only gave full pay to coloured troops that were free men before the war. So you're going to have a large people still missing out on this, a large group. And interestingly, Hallowell, the new colonel for the regiment, got the men to take an oath, because Hallowell was a Quaker. He didn't believe in slaves, and he didn't see the men as slaves. So he had them take an oath to kind of declare that they were all freemen before the war. I don't know too much about this, obviously worth looking more into, but because of this, it allowed all the troops to qualify for this even equal pay, and they were eventually kind of back paid, but this took so long that some of the men had actually been serving for over 18 months by the time they got their full pay. Kind of an interesting quote from a battle with the 54th, where they were ordered to protect a Union retreat, and as the 54th marched forward, they were heard shouting Massachusetts and $7 a month to kind of reflect their lack of pay, which is quite an interesting quote. One last little thing which I found was quite interesting, that in the 54th Massachusetts, at the Battle of Boykin Mill, saw the last officer death for the Union Army in the Civil War, and he served in the 54th Massachusetts. So that was quite interesting. The person who died was First Lieutenant E.L. Stevens. And yeah, he was the last federal officer killed in action during the war. So quite interesting. So yeah, that's kind of my little bit about the 54th Massachusetts. I felt when I was building up my uni army that I kind of had to include these because they're such an iconic unit. I'll probably look at another coloured unit as well, maybe the 1st Kentucky, I think. I can't remember their name, but I'll be looking at some more. Really enjoyed painting these. Like I said, the head sculpts and Perrys are really good, and they weren't too fiddly to do either when it came to gluing them onto the bodies. So I'll end the video there, a bit longer than usual, but I hope this video's it's enjoyable and maybe a bit informative. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, keep an eye out for any videos I do in the future. Cheers guys.